Let me ask you a question, and I want you to answer it honestly, even if only to yourself. If someone took everything away from you tomorrow, your job, your title, your degree, even your passport, who would you be? Most young Africans, if we are honest, do not have an answer to that question. We have been taught who we are by our jobs, by our tribes, by our colonial inheritance, by our parents' expectations, by Western definitions of success. But here is the thing, none of those things are actually you. And until you know who you are underneath all of that, you will spend your entire life building on a foundation that is not yours. Today, I want to talk to you, the young African on the continent or in the diaspora, about the first and most important question of your life. Who are you before you are anything else? My name is Henry Obodai Ago. I am a Ghanaian diplomat currently serving at the Ghana Embassy in Brussels as a counselor of social diaspora and OSBS affairs. But long before I was a diplomat, I was a young man from Ghana carrying the same question you might be carrying right now. At 20 years, I left Ghana on a scholarship to Morocco. I went to study economic analysis, then went on to pursue a master's degree in decision making and risk management. On paper, I was succeeding. I had credentials, I had a trajectory, I had the validation. But inside, I was searching for meaning, for purpose, who I actually was beneath all those achievements. On this channel, I teach kingdom principles for the African mind, identity, purpose, potential, and what it means to build a life and a continent that reflects who we truly are, not who colonialism told us we were, not who the West told us to become, who our source, God, designed us to be. I'm glad you are here. Let's begin. Here is the truth that most young Africans are never taught. Identity comes before activity, and who you are comes before what you do. Being comes before doing. This is the order that our Creator God established, and every other order is broken. Every single order leaves you fragmented, anxious, and searching. The world will try to define you by what you do. The West will define you by your career, your job title, your salary, your position in some corporation or organization. Your village will define you by your family name, by your lineage, by who your parents were and what they accomplished. Your tribe will define you by your ethnicity, by your cultural group, by the tradition you inherit. The continent will sometimes define you by your poverty or by your potential, as if you are either the problem to be solved or the resources to be developed. But none of these definitions are your true identity. They are descriptions of your circumstances. They are descriptions of your function. They are descriptions of people's expectations. They are not you. Your true identity is decided by your source, God. It is decided by God. Before you ever achieve anything, before you earn a degree, before you held a job, before colonialism ever drew the borders of the country you were born in, you were already somebody. You already had value. You already had purpose. The question is not who you will become. The question actually is who you already are and whether you will spend your life discovering it or running from it. Image first, assignment second. Being first, doing second. That is the kingdom order. That is the order of creation. And recovering this is the beginning of everything else in your life. Let me tell you my own story because I lived this question before I could teach it to anyone else. At 20 years, I left Ghana for Morocco on a scholarship. Imagine that for a moment. A young Ghanaian Christian arriving in an Arab Muslim country, far from home, far from everything else familiar. I was excited. I was ambitious. I studied economics. I was on track by every external measure. I was successful. I had a degree that mattered. I was studying for my master's. I was being groomed for something bigger. But inside, I was carrying a question I could not answer. What is my life actually for? What am I actually building towards? I had been taught how to succeed. I had not been taught who I was. And in Morocco, far from Ghana, far from the definitions that had been handed to me by my family, by my culture, by my society, that question became unbearable. It kept me up at night. I would achieve everything or something and feel empty. I would accomplish a goal and wonder why it didn't matter. Then I encountered the teaching of Dr. Miles Monroe, a man from the Bahamas, who taught about the kingdom of God, about identity, about purpose, about potential. And the thing that broke me open, the thing that changed everything was this. I realized I had been trying to discover myself through what I was achieving, when the truth was that my identity had been decided before I ever achieved anything at all. I was not a Ghanaian first. I was not an economist first. I was not a future diplomat first. I was a child of God. I was made in God's image with a purpose that existed before I was born. Everything else, my nationality, my career, my titles, my accomplishments, was meant to be an expression of that identity and not the source of it. Do you hear the difference? Not the source, the expression, the outflowing, the natural results. That changed my life. The diplomatic career came after. The clarity came first. And I'm here today because I want you to find that clarity decades earlier than I did. I want you to build your life on a foundation that is actually yours. Now, let me give you three signs that you may be living from a borrowed identity instead of the true one. These are signs I see often in young Africans. And I want you to listen carefully because if any of them hits you, that's important information. Sign number one, you feel anxious whenever you are not productive. If rest makes you feel guilty, if a day without achievement feels like a day wasted, you cannot sit still without feeling like you are falling behind. Then it is because you have tied your worth to your output. Many young Africans carry enormous pressure to succeed for our families, for our communities, for our continent. And that pressure is real. I understand it, but it has a shadow side. We begin to believe we only matter when we are producing. We begin to believe our value is proportional to our productivity. Here is the kingdom difference, and this is crucial. Kingdom identity is not earned through productivity. It is not something you have to achieve or prove. It is received, it is given, and then it is expressed through productivity. Two completely different postures. One leaves you exhausted and never satisfied, the other leaves you free. Sign number two, you are more comfortable being defined by where you are from than by who you are. Your tribe, your village, your country, these are gifts. They are beautiful. They are part of your story, but they are not your deepest identity. If someone challenges your tribe and you feel your whole self is being attacked, if you cannot separate your value from your ethnicity, that is a sign that your identity has migrated into something smaller than it was meant to be. You are African, yes, that is true and it is good. But you are a child of God first, and your African identity is meant to flow from that and not to replace it. When your primary identity is your tribe or your nation, you become vulnerable. You can be manipulated by those things. You can be divided by those things. You can't be made to feel inferior because of those things. But when your primary identity is who you are in God. When you know that you are made in his image and that your value comes from him, then your African identity becomes stronger, not weaker. It becomes clearer. It becomes more powerful. It becomes something you can build from instead of something you are defending. Sign number three, you don't know what you would do if you didn't have to prove yourself. Many of us, especially those in the diaspora, run on a hidden engine. We run on the need to prove that we belong, that we are not less, that Africa can compete with the West. That fuel works for a while. It can propel you forward, but it's exhausting and it is not kingdom fuel. It is fear fuel. It is comparison fuel. It is not sustainable. A person rooted in their true identity does not need to prove anything. They are free to build because they want to build, not because they need to prove themselves. They are free to serve because they want to serve and not because they need validation. They are free to rest without guilt. They are even free to fail without losing themselves. If you recognize yourself in any of these three signs, that is actually good news. It means you are becoming aware, and awareness is the first step to change. So, what do you actually do? How do you begin to recover your true identity when you have been living from a borrowed one your whole life? I'm going to give you three practices. Start with this today. Practice number one, change your language. This might sound small, but it rewires everything. Stop saying, I am a doctor or I am an engineer. Start saying, I work as a doctor or I am studying engineering. That small shift from I am to I work as begin to retrain your mind to hold identity and activity as separate categories. You are not your job. You do a job. You do a job as an expression of who you are. And that distinction might sound small, but it rewires everything about how you relate to your work. When you say, I am a doctor, your entire sense of self is tied to that role. Your value is tied to it. Your purpose is tied to it. If you lose that job, you lose yourself. You lose your identity. But when you say, I work as a doctor, you separate who you are from what you do. Suddenly, if you lose the job, you don't lose yourself. You lose a role, you lose a position, but you don't lose you. That's freedom. That's the freedom that comes from knowing who you are underneath what you do. Practice number two, spend time being, not doing. Take 15 minutes a day without your phone, without podcast, no scrolling, no input of any kind. Just you alone with your source, God. Sit with yourself, be present. If that is uncomfortable, and it probably will be, the discomfort is your teacher. It shows you how dependent you have become on activity to feel alive. It's showing you that you have learned to define yourself through doing rather than being. The Africans who will lead this continent forward are not the ones who know how to hustle the hardest or produce the most. They are the ones who can sit still with themselves and not flinch. They are the ones who have recovered their sense of self independent of their accomplishments. They are the ones who know who they are in the quiet moments. This is harder than it sounds. We are addicted to doing. Our phones are addicted to keeping us doing. Our careers demand doing. Our families expect doing. Our culture celebrates doing. But being, just existing, just being present with yourself and with God, that is where you discover who you actually are underneath all of the doing. Practice number three, ask the deeper question. Stop asking, what should I do with my life? That question is important, but it comes second. Start asking, who was I designed to be? And what kind of life would naturally flow from that being? The first question leads to anxiety. It leads to comparison. It leads to chasing other people's definition of success. The second question leads to clarity. It leads to peace. It leads to a life that is actually yours. The first question is how the world teaches you to think. The second question is how the kingdom teaches you to think. And they produce different lives. One life is built on external validation. The other is built on internal truth. One life is exhausting. The other is sustainable. One life is somebody else's. The other is yours. And here is what I want you to hold, especially as a young African. As you think about your identity and your future, this is not just personal development. This is not just about feeling better about yourself. It is about Africa. Africa does not need a generation that knows how to perform. No. Africa has enough of performers. Africa needs a generation that knows who it is. A people who have recovered their identity cannot be manipulated. They cannot be made to feel inferior. They cannot be bought. And they cannot be stopped. That's very important. A people who know who they are will build differently. They will lead differently and they will serve differently. The renewal of this continent will not begin with new policies or new money. No. It will not begin with the better infrastructure or more foreign investment. It will begin with a young African who knows deep in their bones who they actually are and who builds their family, their work, and their nation from that settled place, from that foundation, from that truth. That renewal begins with you. Today, answering the first question, not how do I succeed, not how do I prove myself, but who am I before I'm anything else? Answer that question and everything else follows. The purpose becomes clear, the path becomes clear, the life you are meant to build becomes clear. If this resonated with you, if something in this teaching touched something real in you, subscribe to this channel so you don't miss the next teaching. I'm going to be diving deeper into these kingdom principles, and you are going to want to be here for it. Next time, we talk about purpose, specifically why most young Africans are chasing the wrong purpose because they skip the identity step entirely. They are asking, what should I do? Before they have answered, who am I? And that creates a life that is misaligned and confused. But when you get the order right, identity first, then purpose, then action, everything changes. Until then, remember this: identity before activity, being before doing. You are not what you do. You are not where you are from. You are not your job, your title, your degree, or your passport. You are who your source, who God designed you to be, and everything else, all the rest of it, is meant to flow from that. It's meant to be an expression of that, not a replacement of that, not a substitute for that. I am Henry Ago. Thank you for being here. Let's build the Africa we are meant to build, starting with knowing who we actually are.